Favoya. It's been an incredible tournament. Like Jess said, the improvements that have been made since last year.
What if I told you that the world of tennis, so elegant, so poised, was torn apart not by a match, but by a single sentence? One whisper caught by a courtside microphone would ignite one of the most divisive scandals the sport has ever seen. It happened on an ordinary afternoon at the Wuhan Open. The crowd expected a fierce, clean semifinal between two of the WTA's brightest stars, Coco Gauff, the young American prodigy, and Aryna Sabalenka, the fierce Belarusian powerhouse ranked world number 1. But what no one knew was that by the end of the night, the tennis world would no longer be talking about serves or sets, but about racism, silence, and dignity. At first, nothing seemed out of place. Aryna was frustrated after missing a crucial point. She muttered something under her breath, like every player does. But then slow-motion clips started to circulate online. Fans enhanced the audio word by word, frame by frame. What they heard sent shockwaves across the internet. It wasn't just frustration. It was a racial slur. Within hours, hashtags exploded, arguing stand with Coco, you had no room for racism, WTA under fire. Commentators were speechless. Players began unfollowing Aryna on Instagram. Sponsors quietly froze campaigns. And through it all, the WTA said nothing. No statement, no apology, no investigation. That silence was deafening. It wasn't just about what Aryna said. It was about what the system didn't say. The institution built on fairness, grace, and respect suddenly looked complicit. As the hours turned into days, everyone waited for Coco's reaction. Would she call Aryna out publicly? Would she demand punishment? Or would she remain silent too, the way the organization had? For 24 hours she said nothing. Not a word, no post, no tweet, just quiet. But for those who knew Coco, that silence meant one thing. She was preparing to speak in a way that the world couldn't ignore. When she finally stepped in front of the press under the bright lights of the media room, everyone held their breath. "I'm not here to start a damn war," she said calmly. "I'm here to ask for fairness." In that moment, everything changed. Her voice didn't tremble. Her gaze didn't shift. She didn't even mention Aryna's name. Yet her words cut through the noise, sharper than any serve she'd ever hit. It wasn't a cry for pity. It was a call for integrity. And that was just the beginning. It all began like any other semifinal. The Wuhan Open, floodlights blazing, cameras whirring, the air electric with anticipation. Two women stepped onto the court, both born to fight, both carrying the weight of nations on their shoulders. But neither of them could have imagined what would unfold under those lights. Coco Gauff, just 20 years old, carried herself like a veteran, calm, focused, unshaken. Aryna Sabalenka, the number 1 seed, was the favorite. Her power game, her raw intensity, unstoppable on her day. But that night something was off. Her serve faltered, her shots went wide, and frustration began to boil beneath her composure. Then came that point. A long rally, a missed forehand, a muttered line that would echo across the tennis world. The cameras caught her lips moving. No one heard it clearly at first, but online fans replayed the moment over and over again, slowing the footage down, enhancing the audio. And then, there it was, a single cruel word that crossed the line. At first, disbelief, then outrage. Within hours, social media was ablaze. Clips were shared millions of times. The caption was simple. Did Aryna Sabalenka just say that? Commentators didn't know what to say. Journalists scrambled for statements. The WTA, silent. The longer they waited, the louder the anger grew. Stand with Coco wasn't just trending. It was everywhere. Fans, athletes, celebrities, all demanding accountability. But Aryna's camp said nothing. No apology, no explanation. Her agent declined to comment. Her coach disappeared from interviews. It was as if everyone hoped it would just go away. Except it didn't. Coco's silence had weight. People waited for her to speak, not because they wanted drama, but because they trusted her. She'd built a reputation as the calm center of chaos, the young player who carried herself with old-world grace. When she finally spoke, she didn't raise her voice, she didn't accuse, she simply demanded respect. And that's when things turned from controversy into history. The story outgrew the match. It became something bigger, about race, about sportsmanship, about the uncomfortable truths tennis had buried for too long. Reporters began to dig. Old clips resurfaced. Comments Aryna had made years before suddenly looked different in hindsight. The storm had officially become a hurricane. Meanwhile, Coco went quiet again. No rants, no interviews, just focus. The next morning, photographers captured her walking into the practice court, headphones on, head held high. The caption went viral. "She doesn't talk, she works." That single image said more than any statement could. Behind closed doors, WTA officials were panicking. Sponsors called for action. Networks questioned their partnerships. What had started as a single outburst was now a global story, and their silence made them look guilty. But Coco didn't need to fight them. She just needed to stay herself. Because sometimes, dignity is the loudest protest of all. When Coco finally stepped back into the spotlight, the world expected fury. Instead, they got grace. She entered the press room wearing a white hoodie, no makeup, her hair tied back. The flash of cameras filled the room, reporters whispering, "Will she name Aryna? Will she call for punishment?" But Coco simply adjusted the microphone, looked straight into the crowd and said, "I'm not here to start a war. I'm here to ask for fairness." That one line changed everything. The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was emotional. Even journalists trained to stay detached nodded in silence. It wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about something that went deeper than tennis. Respect. Coco didn't accuse, didn't dramatize. She spoke as if she was teaching the world how to respond to hate, with composure, not chaos. She talked about working her whole life for the right to be seen not as a symbol, but as an athlete. "I've earned my place here," she said, "and I won't let anyone define me with one word." Those words resonated far beyond the sport. Within hours, quotes from her speech filled social media feeds, TV tickers, even political commentary shows. Everyone had an opinion. But one truth stood out. Coco Gauff had handled it better than anyone expected. Meanwhile, Aryna Sabalenka stayed silent for 3 days. When she finally posted an Instagram statement, it read, "Emotions run high in matches. Things can be misunderstood. I never intended to hurt anyone. Let's move forward with respect. No apology, no accountability. Just a polished, vague note that sounded like it had been written by a PR manager." The reaction was brutal. Comments flooded in. "You didn't apologize. You got caught." 3 days of silence, and that's what you came up with? The internet doesn't forgive insincerity. Aryna's image began to crumble. Her sponsors hesitated. Even her fellow players distanced themselves. Every word she said after that felt forced, rehearsed. But Coco? She just kept playing. She trained, smiled, and let her racket speak. When asked about Aryna's apology, she said quietly, "I've said what I needed to say. I'm focused on tennis now." It was the perfect contrast. Anger met with composure, noise met with calm. And then, something unexpected happened. Legends of the game began to speak out. Serena Williams tweeted, "Proud of Coco. Enough is enough." Naomi Osaka called her a class act in a world that's forgotten what that means. Even Rafael Nadal weighed in. Respect must come before rivalry. It wasn't just a scandal anymore, it was a movement. Behind the scenes, sponsors began pushing the WTA to respond. Some threatened to pull funding. Others demanded stricter anti-discrimination policies. Suddenly, the silence that had once protected the organization turned into a liability. And all the while, Coco remained silent. Again. But this time, it wasn't the silence of shock, it was the silence of strength. Her coach later said, "She cried that night. Not because she lost the match, but because she felt unseen. And then she decided that if no one would speak for her, she'd do it herself." That decision was the seed of something powerful, because the next time Coco Gauff spoke publicly, she wasn't just defending herself. She was redefining what it means to be an athlete. What began as a scandal soon evolved into something far more powerful. A turning point, not just for Coco Gauff, but for the entire sport of tennis. While the headlines about Aryna Sabalenka's comments slowly faded, Coco's name remained. But not because of the controversy, because of what she did next. She refused to let her story be defined by pain. Instead, she turned it into purpose. Within weeks, Coco announced a new initiative called Serve Right. It wasn't a charity, it was a movement. A campaign built around 3 words that she'd carried through the storm: respect, fairness, dignity. Her mission was simple: to make sure young athletes, no matter their background or color, never felt invisible again. She visited schools, talked to junior players, and shared her story, not as a victim, but as proof that strength doesn't need to shout. "Fairness isn't a favor," she said in one interview. "It's a right." That sentence became the slogan of the campaign. Gigern Serve Right started trending worldwide. Kids wore it on shirts, coaches printed it on banners. Even players who once stayed silent about discrimination began to repost it. And the impact didn't stop there. The WTA, under growing pressure, was forced to act. They released a public statement acknowledging that cultural awareness and respect training would now be mandatory for players and staff. For an organization that had ignored similar issues for years, this was monumental, and everyone knew this happened because of Coco. Meanwhile, Aryna Sabalenka tried to rebuild her image with interviews, apologies, and photo ops. But the public had already made up its mind. Every time she stepped onto the court, the applause was polite, distant. Her talent remained, but her reputation was fractured. Coco, on the other hand, was on a different trajectory. She began winning again, focused, fearless, unshaken. Each victory felt symbolic, as if she wasn't just winning points, but reclaiming respect for every athlete who had ever been diminished by prejudice. When she lifted the Miami Open trophy months later, it wasn't just a sports moment. It was poetic justice. She looked straight into the camera, smiled softly, and said, "Winning is great, but standing for something bigger than yourself, that's what lasts." Those words echoed everywhere, from BBC headlines to late-night shows. Even people who'd never watched a single match of tennis were suddenly talking about her. Coco had transcended the game. And maybe that's what true legacy looks like. Not the number of titles, not the trophies, but the courage to stay calm when the world expects rage, and to turn unfairness into change. She once said, "My parents taught me that silence can be louder than shouting." Now the world understood what she meant. In a sport built on grace, Coco reminded everyone that grace isn't weakness, it's power under control. And maybe that's the real victory. Can sports ever truly be free from prejudice? Or do we just learn to hide it better? If Coco's story moved you, hit that like button, share this video with someone who believes in fairness, and subscribe for more untold stories behind the game. Because sometimes the loudest wins come from the quietest voices.